Welcome, YouTube. We appear to be live. Welcome, YouTube. We appear to be live. Welcome, YouTube. We appear to be live. And that echo confirms it. All right. So thanks for tuning in, folks. Looking at the space weather. And we got a sunspot. Sunspot 2734. There you have it. The last about 12 hours. We're going to zoom in real nice and close. Anyway, there's that view. We'll just lose that view entirely. Here's the 94 angstroms view. Sunspot 2734 with its odd perpendicular polarity. The question is, which sunspot cycle is it from? Well, it's probably from 25. By the way, we just live streamed half an hour without any screen captures. So we apologize for anybody who was listening to that. Here's the visuals that go along with it. Now, this area here in the circle, we also see some X-ray flares coming out of that, as well as a streamer in this 94 angstroms view, which we just happened to catch. So we'll show you what's going on with that. There we go. Check this out. Whoops. Missed it. There we've got a streamer. Upon further examination, I think it's actually associated with this active region right here and its interaction with these diffuse coronal holes around these areas. But it barely lasts a frame there. It's actually breaking up at the end of the frame. You see the way it looks. It doesn't look pointy at the tip. It actually looks dull at the tip. So it's probably just about to crash back into the corona there. There's a piece of plasma flying around. And anyway, there's the sunspot 2734 close up. Let's look at some other views here. Now this is the last 48 hours in 304 angstroms. You will see the timestamps. You see some filamentary activity there on the eastern portion, as well as some stuff resembling crown prominences there on the North Pole. So nothing too extravagant going on, but there is a sunspot, and it's a real sunspot. So that's something. Let's look at the real-time solar wind. And I did something. Ha. So the real-time solar wind, we see no connection to any coronal holes, and that's undoubtedly because of the all the activity going on there toward the eastern portion of the solar disk, including an actual sunspot So we don't expect to see a coronal hole magnetic field connection there. Although it could happen, it would probably be a temporary one that didn't last very long, as we've got active regions kind of taking control of the solar disk. Now, the solar wind has been upticking since yesterday. It's all the way up to 8.73 protons per cubic centimeter. Solar wind ramping back up again. So we're starting to see the wind stream from that diffuse system of coronal holes there. And Windows is telling me to install a bunch of crap that I don't want. So solar wind up to 483 kilometers per second. Solar ham, who's analyzing the active region as they do. Check it out, 2734. They've always got the zoom-ins when you got a real one. And we've got a beta class because we got two real fields here, people. So you've got, there's your North Pole associated negative charge, and there's your South Pole associated positive charge. So it is a legit sunspot. It has actually been increasing in intensity. So something to keep an eye on there as it does continue to evolve throughout the day today. Personally, I'm a little partial to the 171 angstroms view. Let's look at spaceweathernews.com for a little more information here. We did see some X-ray flares in the B-class range. Now, what's going on with the magnetometers is anybody's guess. Something doesn't look quite right. And for some reason today, the 14 is completely off. It's just gone. So we were originally seeing a much larger scale here, where the top portion of this went up to 150 nanotesla, and now we see the shrunken scale. Now the GOES 14 is gone, and the GOES 15 is still there. So we have had a viewer email NASA. I didn't do so myself because I don't think it would be a fruitful endeavor. But in any case, not sure what's going on with the magnetometer, but I have a feeling the Gong 2 is going to tell us that it's not reading the right thing, unless that's some kind of a crazy tidal magnetic force. And you better hope it's not, because if it is, it's pretty serious. Anyway, here's the electron flux. Nothing too significant going on there. Little spike, undoubtedly associated with the X-ray flares. And exactly it is. This kind of thing is associated with ionization pathways, which get increased by things like X-rays. So while it takes the electrons a while to show up, it takes the X-rays a little less time to show up, and it takes a couple days for the protons to show up. We've got some charging hazards here, quite a bit actually, especially on the internal variety for our satellites. And we see the F2 layer charging up pretty heavy here. And I don't know what's going on with the scrolling, but it's not enjoying it. So we see quite charged region here. And my brush is now too big. It's official. And we see a very discharged region here. So there's going to be a big disparity, as we typically see, as we often see, I should say. So earthquake risk does not end, as the ionosphere is pretty charged. It's pretty charged and pretty discharged. Does that make sense? Pretty charged, pretty discharged. And the rest of the data does corroborate that. There's the aurora forecasts. Let's move on to the geospace magnetosphere movies here. First, we've got the velocity. I must say, using the computer is much more convenient, as this beast has, I think it has 4 gigabytes of memory. 4 or 8, I don't know, it's fine. It's got a video card. It's pretty beefy. Let me just shut down Winamp entirely here and go to the full screen. as we use keyboard shortcuts to navigate through our tabs here to, again, keep everything as dense as possible. Speaking of dense, here's the density, which we see is very high, especially when looking at the equatorial plane view there. And that is associated with the recent increase over the last 24 hours of the solar wind density. It was all the way down to less than 1 proton per cubic centimeter yesterday. Here's the pressure. For those of you not familiar with what is where, this little area right here is the plasmasphere. See that little dot? I should use a smaller thing, but that's the plasmasphere right there. And let me go to a smaller brush. So that little spot, that's the plasmasphere. The ionosphere is underneath that. Here you've got the inner Van Allen belt. Here you've got the outer Van Allen belt. And then you've got the legitimate magnetotail here. And then you got the same thing on the other side here. They're just different sizes. But there's just a little diagram so that everybody understands what is where. And the F2 ionosphere layer is actually much closer to the planet than this can even show you. So this is showing you like several Earth diameters, because again, this is only looking at the magnetosphere. So I can't seem to change the size of that for some reason. There we go. See if I can zoom in farther. Nope. That flash viewer refuses to let us do it. All right, so we'll move on. Next, we'll look at the magnetic perturbations over the poles. Now, let us know if you think the computers are good, folks. I think using the computer might be a little bit beneficial. Now, of course, I am a bit of a power user, gamer, used to be a code writer, who knows a little bit more about using keyboard shortcuts than your average person, perhaps, but yo, this is fantastic. I could just use the phone just to monitor the chat. Do I believe the grand solar minimum will kill the economy and lead people to fighting over food along with infrastructure destruction? Yeah, I think that'll happen. When do I think it will happen? Not in the next 2 years, at least not in the US. In some places, it's poised to happen right now. The thing to remember is that the temperatures, by the way, here's the magnetic perturbations over the globe. The temperatures lag the solar activity by at least 2 years. I say 2 years minimum on the atmospheric effects. And you're looking at between 3 and 20 years by the rest of the estimations. And those are based on things like latency of heat in the ocean. It takes at least a few years. And there are many believe that it takes hundreds, if not thousands of years for the oceans to cool down after the warming periods and so on. So the goal is to look at the stuff at the largest scale you possibly can. And yeah, so I don't think the GSM is going to kill the economy. I think the current solar minimum is going to be about as bad as the last one. So around 2008 to 2010, when the economy was all screwed up. That's what I would expect to see in the current solar minimum, because if the cosmic rays are the appropriate correlation to what the solar activity is doing, is about to do, etc., we don't see a cosmic ray maximum as high now as we saw in 2008 to 2010. So if you look at all the instruments, all the different detectors, all the burst alert telescopes, they all show cosmic ray maximum was between 2008 and 2010, not now. Now we do see a ramp up now, but we're also seeing a ramp up in solar activity, like that sunspot. So we got this perpendicular sunspot, which reminds me, we got to go back to that immediately because it's kind of important. So let's look at the perpendicular sunspot here. We'll go to full resolution. So normally a sunspot is going to form where the yellow field is in front like this, and the green field is behind like this, perpendicular to the solar equator. What we see here is a sunspot forming parallel to the solar equator. So that's absolutely a cycle 25 prediction. We also see higher solar flux than predicted. And these are all good signs for somebody who don't want to see things like the infrastructure get destroyed. Because, yes, while the sun ramps up in activity, the Earth does continue to get colder for at least 2 more years. So the worst weather is still ahead of us, I think. Because it takes at least 2 years for the latency of heat in the oceans to catch up to the solar activity. At least 2 years. I believe Ben Davidson says 3 years, and there are plenty of studies that suggest 20 years. So ultimately, I've said it before, I'll say it again. You can't tell me the temperature of the planet by measuring the atmosphere or the sea surface temperature, or even by measuring the ice, because if you don't know the temperature of the Indian Ocean, especially at depth, you don't know the temperature of the planet. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into climate change that people don't think about, such as if you increase the amount of water in the oceans, not only does the planet slow down as the poles melt, but all the continents flow toward the poles. The planet's rotation slows down like when a ballerina is spinning around and she puts her arms out. That's a real thing that's measurable. I'll put up a study about it later. I watched hours and hours and read for hours and hours about the historic climate change that's happened. You know, sea level's been hundreds of meters lower and higher than it is right now. Anyway, I don't want to get into the weeds anymore about that. Let's look at the Gong 2. So here's the Gong 2, which is actually, and make sure this is the newest one here. All right. We're going to play that at full speed. All right, that's 4 days there. And the reason we're playing at full speed is because you need to see this active region here. The Earth is just about to come out of magnetic smooth sailing here. There's going to be some real spikes in the magnetometer, which is why it's a problem that the magnetometer isn't reading right. That irks me. Check it out. So this region, you see those undulations in the field. The Earth's magnetic connection to the sun is about to get a little bit of a boost, so to speak. And it's not like a coronal hole magnetic connection, folks. Don't get me wrong. But this is a good sign. We're expecting to see a higher solar flux as a result, because ultimately you don't want to see a solar minimum. Solar minimums are bad for you. All right, so let's look at the earthquake situation. Go over the last 24 hours here, as we see some interesting quakes, to say the least. So here we've got one in Mexico, 4.8, right at the top of the warning area, which, by the way, is this zone here. I guess I should include that too. Yeah, that zone there and this zone here. This zone here. Maybe go a little farther inland on South America too. Those two areas are at a massive 6 to 7 magnitude earthquake drought. So please be on alert. Be an asset instead of a liability if buildings start to fall down where you're located in these areas. Is that a good visual, folks? Let me know in the comments. All right, let's move on here. 5.1 in Alaska, the largest one we've seen in the Aleutians for a while, and we see tons of volcanic activity in that area also. Next, we see another 4.8 in Mexico at the same place. Indonesia, right in the smack dab in the center of the watch zone, 4.2. We see a 4.2 near India, in Afghanistan. Next, we got a 4.9 in Mexico, right at the north part of the watch zone. Chile, we got a 4.4, right in the watch zone. Now, here's an odd one. Poland, with a 4.1. 4.2 in Mexico, and it's not, there we go. 4.7 in Mexico, so quite a swarm there. Now, here's a more troubling quake, a 519-kilometer deep 4.5 at Fiji. Indonesia, 4.8, right in the warning zone. Tennessee. Weirdest one yet. Kind of in the northeastern reaches of the New Madrid. And another one in Mexico. One in Peru, right in the middle of the watch zone. Philippines with a 5.7. I think that's the largest one we've seen. Oh, actually, there's two in it. One in the Pacific and one in the Atlantic. There's one in Colombia. Lots of quakes in the Caribbean too, by the way. Here we have the Bouvet Island region, very far south. Haven't seen one there in quite a while. New Caledonia, right near Fiji. The West Chilean Rise, right on the plate boundary there. Also, deep in the ocean, we see a 4.7 at Indonesia and right in the watch zone. So, again, let's just put that in place again. Is that a good visual? There's the watch zone. If you're there, be an asset, not a liability. Inform people. Look out your door. Figure out what's going to be falling. Save lives. Don't be saved. About volcano discovery. To see some more disasters, we got Mount Manam with a 10,000-foot ash plume. Tucono, 7,000-foot ash plume there. Popocatépetl with the explosive activity. That volcano is pretty nuts. Check out Volcano YT. If you want to watch it in real time, it's probably exploding right now. Revenador with a 15,000-foot ash plume. Sabancaya with intermittent emissions. And Planchon Petaroa with a 15,000-foot ash plume. So lots of activity going on. Let's look at the total electron content forecast. As we see some GPS errors are going to be happening. So you see some electron spikes there, and especially on the equator, obviously, but we do see some anomalous spikes in the Pacific Northwest. So expect your GPSs to be off by a few meters. And what else do we have? How about our own channel? Check out the channel, youtube.com/smAsho. Check out our officially endorsed channels, which are in a random order, by the way. Next, let's look at Zooniverse.org, who's got multiple citizen science projects, including Galaxy Zoo. Before I do get started, though, let me leave these delightful graphics on the screen. So people are dying to see this. Haha! Check out the artifacts. And look at that galaxy. It looks like half of a galaxy. That should be called the the funnel galaxy. All right, anyway, let me read the comments here because I'm really far behind. 2025 to 2030. Yeah, I think cycle 25 is going to be slightly larger cycle than cycle 24. All signs seem to point to it. We're basing the next cycle on the decline of the next. So if cycle 25 is, let's say cycle 25 is the same size as cycle 24. If that's the case, cycle 25 is the same size as cycle 24. We would expect the minimum, the solar minimum, might be worse, might be a lower solar minimum than the one we're currently in. And as far as we know, what's on the screen right now from solon.info is the best way to try to predict this, because you need to look at the solar polar fields and their relative reversals, as it's not an overall reversal really, but the relative reversals of the solar polar fields is a big deal. And that's why those sunspots are a big deal. When you have a sideways polarity sunspot like that, that's the kind of thing you see. That's the kind of thing you're going to see in between cycles, when one cycle's turning off and another cycle's turning on. So, yeah. And again, I reiterate, the climate change takes at least 2 years behind the solar forcing. So when the sun's activity goes from the lowest it gets back into an upward mode of activity, the climate does not catch up to that. It's a lagging indicator by at least 2 years. Those of you who are interested in economics, you know what a lagging indicator is. The Earth's climate is a lagging indicator of solar activity. It takes 2 years minimum to catch up, and it's because of the latency of heat in the oceans. The Earth's temperature is almost in the surface temperature of the planet is almost entirely contained in the Earth's oceans, not in the atmosphere. So you can't measure the atmosphere or the surface of the oceans and expect to know what the climate is, much less the current temperatures. You got to measure it at least 9 meters deep in the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean and the Arctic Ocean to really know what the planet's temperature is, because water has massive heat latency. Water has more heat latency than most rocks. So, all right, enough bloviating about that. Go to Galaxy Zoo, one of the largest citizen science projects in the world, in the history of mankind. One of the largest citizen science projects in the history of mankind. Yes, I am interested in being a cartoon villain voice guy. So if anybody's got any connections, email me at smashomash@gmail.com. All business inquiries, please contact us at smashomash@gmail.com. Let's classify a galaxy. Boy, this is sure better on the computer, right? We've got a total artifact going right across the middle of it. We're going to ignore that entirely because we understand the physics. So what is this? It's got features. Is it an edge-on disk? Well, certainly not. Is there a bar? Well, no. Is there any sign of a spiral arm pattern? Well, there certainly isn't. Is there a central bulge? Indeed there is. We're going to say moderate. Is it merging or disturbed? Nope. Are there any rare features? Well, there certainly are. There's a huge overlap of this artifact, which is something like a beam of light from a foreground brighter object that interfered with the imaging of this. That's all it is. There is something that looks a little weird over here. I'm going to say that's a dust lane, as there's nothing else to call it. It's not really irregular. We'll just say something else too. And that galaxy is classified. It's covered. So here's one that looks like kind of almost an edge-on spiral. Head to zooniverse.org. By the way, they've got other projects there too. Let me just show you some of the other stuff that they've got. One of the ones we were looking at, which we can't show you on the phone because it requires heavy graphics. I was doing one here to help with conservation, to help identify humans and animals. So check this one out too if you like. Pretty interesting. So this one, I can't tell what any of this is. I see something in the foreground there, and that was a terrible example. All right, so now this one here clearly looks like two rhinos. So all you do is you just, and there you go. This helps to prevent poaching, and it helps to write the code for the drones that do the filming. I don't see anything on this, so let's just say done. And once again, we see some, let's see, that's a rhino. That's a rhino. I don't know what those are. They could be rhinos. That's probably a rhino too. Could be an antelope. Who knows? Anyway, zooniverse.org, some interesting citizen science stuff going on there. Check it out if you like. Let me get back to the rest of these comments. By the way, thanks everybody for all the comments. I appreciate that. Let's get some other views of the sun going on here. How about we don't look at the 131 angstroms that much. This will give you a good idea of that sunspot for the last 48 hours. All right, now, where was I? This is just fantastic. All right. All right, so where were we here? I just said at least 2 years to reach the low temperatures. Yes, yes, yes. You can quote me. You can quote me. At least 2 years. Yes, there's a correlation between geopolitics and climate change because people want to tax you, and then they're going to say, if we hadn't taxed you, the planet wouldn't have cooled down. See, we taxed you, we geoengineered, we did whatever stupid things. We've taxed your carbon, we reduced carbon emissions even though other countries didn't, and now the temperature dropped thanks to us and our Green New Deal, for instance. By the way, Adapt 2030 features us on their channel. I haven't watched the latest one because I was busy making this video, but emailed NASA and NOAA about the ghost satellites. Yes, thank you for emailing. We will be interested if you get a response. I didn't expect one, which is why I didn't send any. So in France, Mr. Moorhead, what's going on in France? You're talking about these knee-deep hailstorms or what? So you called Trump directly. All right. Cheers. That is a interesting procedure. Let's just hope that we figure out what's going on with those magnetometers, folks. That's pretty mysterious. In fact, maybe we'll have to do some research in a minute here. Wow. We're getting enough comments that I'm not sure if I'll be able to handle them all. Jeez. All right. Yes. Space weather. By the way, I used to be a singer and my vocal capabilities are a little bit unearthly, so just saying. Getting peeps to grasp basic prepping isn't off the hook difficult. I have 200 buckets of rice. 200 buckets of rice, nice. If I had anything close to that, I would be delighted. By the way, preppers, I'm not prepared at all for any major disasters, except by having the skills, talent, and training that I have. Besides that, not very prepped. So if you're concerned of whether I have an M1A3 Abrams tank in the garage and anti-aircraft artillery batteries, I don't. I do have some things, but not those. Let's go to a different solar view here. By the way, irregular viewers, the 131 angstroms view takes more photos, like the 94 angstroms. This one and the 94 angstroms take 5 times as many photos. So if you see some crazy feature, you really want to look at it close up, use the 131 and the 94. I want to do an ultra close up of the, let's do an ultra close up of the sunspot here. We're going to look at about 12 hours. I'll make it 13 hours. And let's do the 304 angstroms view. All right, let me get back to the comments here, which you won't see on the screen, but yes, I am one of the viewers of my own live streams. Why doesn't this thing go away? Anybody got an idea how to get rid of this? You go away. Go away. All right, that doesn't help. All right, that's a little better. All right, back to the comments. I think one of the most important plans to have, folks, is if you're in a highly populated region and the excrement really hits the fan, you need to leave. You just need to be prepared to be able to travel someplace besides where you're at. If you've got some skills, you'll probably be all right, but geez, don't be in a major metropolitan area when a major disaster happens. Remember what it was like on 9/11 when people were taking boats to leave Manhattan? Don't get yourself in a logistical disaster. If you see a solar flare pop off, get the hell out of Dodge. Because the zombie masses will show up for real. And if you're not prepared to repel them sufficiently, don't be there. What else do we got? Yes, John Moorhead, well done. Thank you, Mary Wright. We appreciate your viewing. Yes, socialism. Socialism is a brilliant thing. It's totally going to work this time if we have the right people doing it. Right? How about some old tracks? Let's play an old track here. When I used to use the pseudonym Vi Chang. Here's one of my colleagues. I think he might be insane. I don't talk to him anymore because I think he might be insane.
Yeah, Mr. Vice, this is the Secret Service calling on behalf of Akron Around. And we hear that you've been using some seed samples for your own personal advantage. If you'd like to give me a call at 764, and we'd be happy, more than glad to discuss this with you. Good day.
Yeah, he's out of his mind. We're pretty sure. Anyway.
Yeah, Mr. Vice King.
Whoops.
This is the secret.
I guess I had it on repeat. Huh. That's some bad DJing right there, people. By the way, oh, I almost forgot. People brought up climate change. I almost forgot. Let's go there. Let's go there to Tropical Tidbits. Because oh yeah, there's more information. There's some. Let's look at some forecast models. Since the planet's so hot that it's cold, let's look at how insanely 2-meter temperature anomaly looks. Yeah, it looks like we got places that are 16 degrees Celsius below average across 2/3 of the US. So yeah. And what does this mean? Well, what it means is that if this information lags solar output by 2 to 20 years, and we see 2-week solar cycles in a row, what does that say about the climate? Now, we're only looking at the US. But geez, I mean, you're going to tell me that it's so hot that it's cold? That's not the way a thermometer works, folks. A thermometer is not a circle where it gets hotter and hotter and hotter, and then suddenly it's at the bottom. Here's the last couple days. Goodness gracious. It's so hot that it's cold. Look at that. I mean, let's see here. We've got, what is this down here? That is 16 degrees below average in eastern Mexico. Also in the Gulf of Mexico. Yes. Oh, yeah. So, yep, it's so hot that it's cold, folks. It's so hot that it's cold. Let's look at it. Let's look at a different region here. What can we get? Can we get the Northern Hemisphere? Let's look at the whole Northern Hemisphere. See how hot it is. All right, we got a couple vortices here. And a really ugly map that's like square shaped. Let's see what's going on. All right, there is some hot over there. I'll agree. Anyway, let's look at the jet stream, as we do expect to see an insanely what do you call it? An insanely meridional flow, like a wagon wheel of broken up jet streams. And just so you know, there's a pole here and there's a pole here, which makes your compass point here in most places. So just figured I'd throw that in there. All right, anyway, I got to end the stream. Folks. Let me just try to get through the rest of these comments. Yeah, you know, sea levels were a hell of a lot higher during the Minoan warm period, folks. Like, what was it? 100 meters higher than they are now or something like that? I don't have all the data memorized, so if I'm incorrect, I apologize. Anyway, Sunspot 2734. Let's watch it all day long. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Super nice. I think any kind of preparation is good preparation. Knowing is better than not knowing. And since it'll never be now again, cheers. Also, by the way, you see up here in the upper left-hand screen, there's this horrific logo up here, which says Google. Please try to get them out of your life as much as possible, because their software sucks and they're spying on you. So anyway, cheers. I'm sure this won't get the views of this throttled or anything. Certainly the people that viewed it live's views won't be throttled. So in any case, I'm going to have to get going. We may perhaps make a produced video later today, but not entirely sure. We might stream again. Who knows? We're keeping an eye on the X-ray flux and the magnetometers, wondering what the hell is going on with those two GOES satellites, the 14 and 15, I believe they are. And I'll talk to you later. Thanks again for tuning in. Thanks, subscribers. Please don't forget to share on your social media, as we have been shadow banned hard. Oh, you know what? Let's close it out with one more thing, since this talks about the shadow bans. Here you go. Here's a little tidbit. That's not the right thing.
In 2018, a crack YouTube unit was sent to social media prison by an algorithm for the crime they didn't commit. These producers promptly escaped from maximum security social media stockade to the internet underground. Today, still wanted by social media, they survive as producers of fortune. If you have a problem, if no one else can help, and if you can find them, maybe you can hire the Smash team.
Geez, I don't know what happened there. It loaded a bunch of stuff we didn't want. Anyway, thanks again for tuning in, folks. I'll see you next time. Remember, when you're avoiding nonsense, don't drink. And if you drink, avoid nonsense anyway, but don't drive.